And first roll call, Kelly, if you could do that for us, please.
Sure. Phoebe?
Here.
Oh? Fisher?
Here.
Trolio?
Here.
Zarnes?
Here.
Poley?
Here.
Valderas? Tyson?
Here.
Griffith? Corbett?
Here.
Sidwell? Hankins?
Here.
Lewis? Jones? Smith?
Here.
Downs?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
I'm here. Carson?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And then the next item is the approval of the minutes. We sent those out after the last meeting. So Kelly, would you like to request a motion to approve those minutes?
Sure. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 16th, 2020 meeting?
Ben Strebe moves.
I'll second that, Julie Taylor.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the form distribution. Typically at this meeting, we are handing you a bunch of paper because we're together with you in person and asking you to sign so that we can have all of that in place for the upcoming fiscal year. So you will be receiving an email from us for the authority to change form for the upcoming fiscal year. If there are any staff in your treasurer's office that you would like to give the ability to ask LACA to make changes to your software based on their request. So everybody will receive that form. There's also an FTP directory form that you will receive if you have users that currently have an FTP account so that we can make sure that you still want them to continue to have that access. And then any districts who are still on Classic will receive from us an ODJFS transmission authorization form. The districts that are live on eFinance Plus and the redesign can submit those files themselves, so they don't need to authorize LACA to do that on their behalf. So that's the forms. Any questions on the forms that you will be receiving by email? And then I'm going to back up for a minute. On the approval of the minutes, we received a motion in a second, but we didn't, everybody vote. Is everybody in favor of approving those?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Anybody opposed? Same sign. Okay, thank you, Ben. And the first topic that we have for you is related to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which we discussed at the last fiscal advisory meeting in April. That was the law that was enacted to require you to provide paid emergency sick leave and paid expanded FMLA leave to your employees based on illness or school closure leave due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we discussed all of those requirements at the last meeting, and those payments can be made from April 1st through December 31st. What I wanted to mention is that on the BWC's website, they have an FAQ out there, and they have a question and answer that they posted that says those payments made to your employees are not reportable for premium purposes when you're submitting payroll true up. So I just wanted to point that out in case that applies to you and see if anybody had realized that or had questions about that or comments about that. So this is not their typical paid sick leave. This is just if you're giving them that additional FFCRA paid leave that was required. But those are supposedly not reportable to BWC.
Thank you. I had not heard that.
So I'm not hearing any questions. The next hot topic, I just wanted to mention a few things about the CARES Act. We did not talk about this at the last meeting. This created those additional emergency relief funds, the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund and the governor's emergency education relief fund, which you should now have the ability to add or see in the redesign and classic software. We emailed about releases to those, and the eFinance Plus districts, I believe they also received a message on how to add that to their software. So those are available to you in the software. That was a result of the CARES Act establishing those new funds. The CARES Act also created some changes for your 403B accounts. It relaxed some rules on certain distributions that employees may make due to hardships so that they can actually make a hardship withdrawal due to the coronavirus pandemic. And it's suspended minimum required distributions for them, increased limits on loans, and some of these changes, if you want them to apply to your employees, require your plan to be amended. So I just wanted to mention that and make sure you contact your plan sponsor to make those changes if you haven't already, if you would like to do that.
Harry,
Uh-huh.
do you know when that deadline is to have that plan amended?
I do not off the top of my head, but
I had heard something like 2024, which to me does not really make sense.
I do think it is a very future date. I just don't know exactly when that date is.
Okay.
I'll look and see if I can find that, and if so, I'll send an email out after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
The CARES Act also made some changes to HSA accounts. It allows your employees to purchase over-the-counter medications with their HSA funds, which previously hasn't been allowed for a little while. So that's for any expenses that they incur after December 31st. So for this entire calendar year. And it actually changed it so that it should be effective going forward. There was no end date put on that change. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and again, say that you may want to consult your plan provider to see if you need to make any sort of change to your plan to allow that, because employees are aware that those changes are now available to them potentially with their HSA funds, that they can now purchase those over-the-counter medications again. There were also some changes to student loan assistance, and there were, with this CARES Act, there were requirements that federal student loan garnishments should stop being withheld from wages from March 13th through September 30th of the current year. So your payroll staff may have received notices on stopping garnishments, and this is why. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And of course, it greatly expanded unemployment, the length of time that employees can claim. It provides the additional $600 per week federal benefit above and beyond the state unemployment benefit. And it waives the 1 week waiting period for employees requesting unemployment. So of course, for a while now, and hopefully they're slowing down as people are returning to work, but you've been receiving a lot of unemployment notifications, I'm sure, but the CARES Act is what was responsible for that. So does anybody have any questions about the CARES Act that we can look into for you or that you'd like to ask each other? And the final hot topic that I have for you is related to the student wellness and success. Those student wellness and success funds that you, sorry, let me look here and see. I'm getting a little feedback. Okay. The student wellness and success funds that you've been spending October 17th through the end of this fiscal year, you have to report to ODE how you spent those funds. And that survey is due July 31st. And you as the treasurer or your superintendent can log into the OHID portal to complete that survey. I gave you a link to the instructions for completing that survey and then an email address if you have further questions. So, does anybody have any questions about reporting student wellness and success funds and how you used those funds this year? There is one question in the chat from Carl to everybody. Has anybody seen a good summary of the CARES Act that they would recommend? I know I personally read several articles about it. I think there were a few good summaries in the OASBO Collaborate messages that are received daily, I think is where I saw some good ones. Did anybody else read anything helpful on the CARES Act? Carl, there was also a link in the April 1st OASBO newsletter, if you want to take a look at that as well.
Okay, thanks. I'll check that out.
Okay. And next, Mary will give you an EMIS update.
Here we are at the end of another fiscal year. I want to thank everyone for getting their 5-year forecast submitted. We had everyone submit prior to the May 31st deadline. So now it's time to double check your year-end financial. You can go ahead and submit now. The collection opened this week, and check for maintenance of effort. ODE says go ahead and submit, verify your numbers, check for maintenance of effort, but the department that actually does the maintenance of effort usually doesn't have things to where they can give you any feedback until after June 30. So it's a good idea to update and take a look at your reports, but I don't know if you will get the MOE feedback prior to closing that we were hoping that we would get. The final FY20 funding numbers are usually polled at the end of May. I don't remember that that was specifically stated on the conference call this week, but I know that they typically poll the FY20 funding numbers at the end of May, and then they make adjustments over the next few months. And because there is no report card this year, The majority of the FY20 collections, including the student collection and the assessment collections and the staff course, close August 7th. Any questions on EMIS before we start on the fiscal year end closing?
Hey, Mary, this is Ryan. Hey, speaking of MOE, I had started to review hours back in the middle of May. It looks like we're going to be a little bit light because of the fourth quarter. Some of our services that we would normally pay for, we obviously didn't incur. I spoke with ODE to see if there was going to be any kind of waiver on MOE, and the person that I spoke with believed that there was, but they had nothing from the federal government stating that there would be. So just something that's been checked on, and it does sound like maybe there will be a waiver, but to what degree, ODE wasn't aware at this point.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, let's go ahead and get started on the fiscal year end closing for accounting. This PowerPoint is to be used in conjunction with the fiscal year end accounting procedure handbook and checklist. We have one for redesign, we have one for classic, and in this presentation, we have the steps are in the same order in both. And so we have gone down through, I'll go over one step and I'll explain how to do it in classic. I'll explain how to do it in redesign. So hopefully it's not too confusing for all of you. And so let's just jump right in. The first pre-closing steps, these have to be done prior to closing for the fiscal year end. And the first step is your district and building financial data. This is where you enter in your square footage and your percent of transportation, percent of lunchroom. In Classic, we use the USA EMS DB program to enter that information for the period H collection. The first section is the district, and that's where you put in the central office square footage and then your ITC IRN, which is LACA, and it should be in there already, the 088971. The next option is the building option, and this is where you have to add each building IRN of all of your open buildings. For those of you that had to create buildings because you have an IRN associated with a preschool program, those building IRNs also need to be entered in. You need to enter in the square footage, and the transportation percentage and the lunchroom percentage are the percentages of your overall transportation. How much transportation percentage is of your riders are from X building, how much are from Y building, so on and so forth. That your transportation percentages should total 100, your lunchroom percentages should total 100. The instances where they don't are some of the districts that provide these services to auxiliary entities such as non-publics, then they may not necessarily have the percentages totaling 100, because those building IRNs are not buildings in your district and would not be reportable. Are there any questions about this part? There is a report that you can run, the third option in that menu, that will give you a listing of everything that you have entered in. For the redesign, there are two different areas where we need to update. The first is in the core organization, and that's where the central office square footage and the ITC IRN is entered in. this is on the bottom of that screen. The next area is under the periodic menu, and it's called Building Profiles. This information was imported from Classic. I do need to say on the previous slide, the central office square footage and the ITC IRN was not imported when we imported your data into the redesign. So those districts that just converted this spring, then go back and double check and make sure that that information did get entered in. Under the periodic building profiles, this information did get entered in when we imported your data, and you just need to update the transportation and the lunchroom percentage. And this is for all of you. If any of you had building projects this year that would have changed the square footage of any of your building IRNs, then you will need to update that square footage amount. There is also a report under the report manager called SSDT District Building Information, and that report can be run and verify your information. The next thing we want to do is run VALAC, or Validate Account, to check for any invalid accounts. In Classic, it's the VALAC program. It'll create a report of invalid accounts with an explanation of why the accounts are considered invalid. Warning messages will not cause any problems when trying to run your year-end programs. And one of the warnings that you'll get is that ODE would prefer that your account has an operational unit associated with it. Those accounts that don't will get prorated across multiple entities rather than assigned to a specific building. And if you're fine with that, those can be ignored. Fatal messages will prevent the data from being pulled and cause fatal errors in EMIS reporting. So to correct your fatal errors, you can use the account change program to correct your invalid accounts. All accounts will be validated regardless of the active, inactive status or any start and stop dates, since inactive accounts may have current fiscal year amounts. Accounts with dollar amount fields that are all zero will be listed as warnings rather than fatals. But if there are any dollar amounts and that is an invalid account, it will be a fatal error. And then this is just a sampling of what the program looks like. And you'll do R to create your account or your report and then verify it. In the redesign, under the reports menu, there is a SSDT account validation report. If invalid accounts exist, then those should be changed via the utilities account change option. This report will only check for invalid dimensions. Other warnings that the Classic VALAC created can be viewed on the level 1 and the level 2 reports in the data collector. So we aren't going to get the OPU warnings. If you do have fatal errors though on the data collector, then you do need to go back and fix those. If you have already closed the fiscal year, you can reopen June and of the prior fiscal year and make your necessary corrections.
Oh, Mary, this is Lottie. Is this something that we're going to have to do, is go into the data collector and run something to get our level 1 and 2
Yes, what you would do is go to the data collector, which we'll talk about running the data collector here in a little bit.
Okay,
And start your collection, do the SIF option, and that SIF option is what goes out to the redesign and pulls all of your account and OPU data.
okay.
But that's a very good question. And you can do that now if you want to get those fatal errors now rather than waiting until you get closer to July and having to reopen periods. The next item, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so reopen periods, when you said that, so if I have a level 1 or a level 2 warning or a fatal or whatever, once I do the collection in the data collector, then I have to go back to previously closed periods, open them up to make corrections?
Only if you have already closed June and you're doing
Okay.
this in July.
Okay,
But if you're running it now, you can make the changes now in June and not have to reopen a prior period.
okay,
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't totally clear on that.
okay. I'm thinking previous periods prior to June, so
Yeah,
that confused me.
no, we can make all of the changes in June and that would be
Okay,
perfect.
okay. Thank you.
Mhm. The next item is to verify the EMIS fund categories. In Classic, this will show up as a VALAC error if there are funds that should have an EMIS fund category and doesn't. And then there is a report called EMIS FCAT that will list all of the funds in fund categories. And you can either update these in USAS Web under accounts, cash account, or in USAS Screen under accounts in your cash account. You can do a F7 help to get a list of all of the fund category codes. For redesign, the EMIS fund category was imported into a custom field on the cash account called EMIS fund category. The EMIS manual section 6.2 of the cash record contains a listing of the EMIS fund categories available. If an EMIS fund category is required, but the list of options don't apply, then you can enter an asterisk. There isn't a lot of information on what ODE does with this, and so the redesign did not create a special field for it, but they used one of the custom fields on the cash account to store this field. So to verify this field, on the cash grid, add the EMIS fund category column to the grid, or do an advanced query. Filter by doesn't equal a space to query all of the funds that contain an EMIS fund category, and verify that they are assigned as need to be. You can also generate a report of all cash accounts to see if there are EMIS fund categories that are missing for accounts that require one. And most of those, I believe, are your federal and maybe some state accounts that require the fund categories. The next option is operational unit. In Classic, the program is called OPU Edit or under USPS Web, configuration operational units, verify the IRN of the entity type. The OPU of all zeros must be the district IRN, and there should be a separate OPU that has an entity type of C to designate central office expenses that is separate from the 000 district-wide OPU. If you have closed buildings that still has an active OPU, change the IRN associated with that OPU to the district so that there are no errors generated on that. In the redesign, verify the IRN and entity type. I believe this is under core OPUs, where you review your OPUs and make modifications as necessary. And the concept are still the same. Really, this is the same concept regardless of what software you're using. Your operational units need to have the building IRN associated with it, that where those funds are to be distributed. And if it is a IRN that is no longer part of your district, or you already have OPU created for a future building that's not open yet this year, then the district IRN should be associated with that. And then the one that is for central office expenses should have that central office designation. We talked a little bit about maintenance of effort. In Classic, there is a Bud Sum that is created as part of the monthly CD reports called Bud Sum MOE. You can look at this in Bear when you close the month of May. It's generated out there, and you can verify and see where you're at as far as tracking your maintenance of effort expenditures. In Redesign, there is an SSDT budget summary MOE in the report manager that you can run to see all of the accounts that pertain to maintenance of effort. And I do recommend that you at least do a collection to verify your level 1 fatal errors first. And it doesn't hurt to go ahead and submit prior to July 1 in hopes that we get some reports back from ODE or feedback back to make sure that you are on track for maintenance of effort reporting. The next thing is doing your appropriations. This is the time of year you can enter in your next year proposed amounts, especially if your building personnel want to enter in their July 1 requisitions and you have the encumbrance tracking or pre-encumbrance tracking turned on, then you do have to have next year estimates in there, next year proposed amounts in there, in order for the building personnel to enter in requisitions dated July 1. You can enter in your next year proposed through the APROP program. And the options there are the NYP INI will clear out and initialize all of your next year proposed so that you're starting from scratch. The NYP mass allows ranges of accounts to be mass updated based on the calculation method chosen. The NYP maintenance is updating an account individually one by one. And then the NYP load will allow you to create a spreadsheet. And I like BudWork because BudWork and RevWork are in the correct format that's needed, you can export those CSV files, update your next year proposed, save them, transfer them back to Classic, and then load them in the MYP load and update all of your next year proposed amounts. To verify your appropriations, there are some data tree reports in the USAS_DTR menu that will allow you to verify what's been entered in. And then there's one in the USAS local menu called AppCom. For redesign, we had the budgetings seminar after the last fiscal advisory meeting to show how to do the budgeting scenarios. But you can go to the budgeting scenarios and create your spreadsheets for next year proposed amounts. And the training video is out there, and then there's step-by-step directions under the about documentation, and then in the appendix useful procedures section. But you can create your spreadsheets in the budgeting scenarios, and then you can promote those and then apply those next year proposed amounts. And then there is appropriation verification reports that you can run to verify the information that has been entered in. Now we're up to the month-end closing. And especially for those districts that are planning on migrating to the redesign starting in the fall, close out all possible open purchase orders that you know you aren't going to be using. This will free up encumbrances, and it will also make things a lot cleaner at the point when you do migrate. So close out all possible open purchase orders that you won't be using. Void any checks as needed for FY20. It's much easier to void them in the current fiscal year than to void a check from a prior fiscal year. And then follow your normal process of closing for the month. After all transactions have been entered, reconcile your accounting with the bank. In Classic, you can run reports called NEGBUD and NEGApp to review for deficit balances. You can use the ACMOD program to make corrections and move money around as needed. If you are a district that always has to have everything to where there are no negative balances showing at all, the SEPVAL program is available, but it's not recommended by the auditors, but it is there if you desire to use it. For redesign, there is the negative budget account and negative appropriation account reports that you can verify, and then use the budget adjustments on the budget accounts or budgeting scenarios. If you have a lot of budget adjustments to do, you can create a budgeting scenario spreadsheet for the next year proposed of FY20. And then when you promote that budget scenario and apply it, it will make the adjustments in FY20 to the additions and the deductions, because when it sees that next year proposed fiscal year of FY20, it knows you are adjusting current year monies rather than applying monies to the next year proposed fields. They do have a set bal type option in redesign if you so desire, and contact us if you want more information about that. For Classic, run the bal check and verify the totals are in balance. Current encumbrance amounts from bal checks should balance with the amounts reported on the PO detail. If they do not, for some reason, the first thing to do is run a program called FYE, Fix Encumbrance. And why this happens, I don't know, but every once in a while, the accounts get out of sync on your encumbrance information. And if you run the FYE, then that will just put everything back into sync again. Also for Classic, you can then run the cash reconciliation from the USA EMS EDT, and that should balance with the FinSum. The FinSum needs to balance with the FinDebt. So when you run FinSum, you can run a FinDebt at the same time. The FinSum pulls from the account file, and the FinDebt pulls from the detailed transactions. If the two do not balance, something was not completely updated during account processing. For the redesign, the cash reconciliation option in the periodic menu should be used to put in your cash reconciliation and should balance with the SSDT cash summary report. Again, the cash summary needs to balance with the financial detail. The detail may be run for the month to balance the month-to-date totals on the cash summary. In Classic, you'll generate your month-end reports as desired, and if you use the MoEnd option to create reports that go into Bear for your board members, or just because you want your set of reports out on Bear, you can run that. And also when you do the backup, the monthly CD reports will be generated. And then these reports are also created by Fiscal CD and will also be on the web and on the CD that we'll create for you. In redesign, generate any reports that you want. When the posting period is closed, the monthly reports bundle will be created that is available under the utilities archive files. Most of these reports are out there, but if there's any reports that you want specifically, then those can be run at any time. Then for Classic, do your SM2 calculations. And I already mentioned MoEnd, I got ahead of myself. And then the backbud, and the backbud is what initiates the monthly CD option. Make sure that those have completed before proceeding. And for Classic, do not run Adjust for June. And I'm going to turn it over at this time to Carrie to go through the rest of the fiscal year in closing.
Thank you, Mary. So once you have done your pre-closing steps and the month closing, like Mary just discussed, you're going to work on closing your fiscal year. So you're first going to, in Classic, complete the USA EMS EDT options. You may have already completed the cash reconciliation like Mary mentioned, or a few of the other options if you looked at any of those. But you need to enter all of these options even if you don't have any data to input, because if you do not enter an option, you will receive an error when you run the USA EMS to extract data for EMIS. So also, it's good to note that each of these options give you the option to generate a report first, so you can see all of the information that is in the option from last year and take a look at that, keep a copy of it as you work on updating the information for this year. That's especially important with the federal assistance detail option to make sure that you keep those CFDA numbers so that you don't have to look those up again. So looking at each of these options in USA EMS EDT, this is what your screen's going to look like when you go in. The first option, your cash reconciliation, is supposed to disclose the position of the school district as of the last day of the fiscal year, according to the EMIS manual section 6.7. So you're going to input all of your ending bank balances, any deposits in transit, outstanding checks, all of your investments, cash on hand, and get your output file, that cashrec.txt. And when you go to exit this option, you're going to see totals on your screen, and you're going to want to verify that the total amount that you entered matches that total fund balance, which is pulling from the account file. And that total that you enter should balance to the current fund balance on your FinSum. So you've already ran your FinSum. You need to make sure the amount that you're entering in the cash rec option 1 adds up to that grand total. If it does not, you will receive a warning when you're running the USA EMS extract option for EMIS. And if you update your cash rec on a monthly basis, then that will be part of the monthly CD that's out there in Bear for you. The second option of USA EMS EDT is the Federal Assistance Summary, and you need to go into this option and update the fiscal year and whether your total federal expenditures were greater than or less than $750,000. Then you're going to go into option 3, the Federal Assistance Detail. And this is the one that we highly recommend you run the report option first so that you have a record of those CFDA numbers that you already have in there. So that's what we recommend you do first in this option. Then you can run the initialization option to delete the prior year information and pull in new information on your 500 funds based on your current year information that's in the account file. And then any other funds that you received that are federal funds need to be added. So your 006 food service federal monies, any other federal monies that you received, you'll need to manually add. The initialization option only pulls in the 500 funds. As you are completing this federal assistance detail option, you can reference the ODE website. They have a summary report available to show you the amount of federal funds that you received from ODE. They also have a listing of the CFDA numbers if you need those, if you either need to look up new CFDA numbers for new federal funds that you received this year for the first time, or if you forgot to run that report option first. And the CFDA numbers, if you need those, are also explained in the EMIS manual section 6.2. The fourth option of USA EMS EDT is for you to enter any civil proceedings or lawsuits that your district is involved in. So the information from last year will already be here. Verify that. If anything has changed, enter that and make sure that information is up to date. If your district is not involved in any lawsuits, you still have to access this option just so that the system knows you looked at it and acknowledged it so that you don't get that error when you're running the extract for EMIS. For these options in the redesign, they are going to be on the periodic menu, and you're going to select the cash reconciliation option and input the same information that we discussed with the classic districts. So the concepts are the same. You're just going to be inputting it instead under periodic cash reconciliation. Then when you are starting your federal assistance summary, that's also under the periodic menu, and you're entering that information for the current fiscal year. And you have to, in redesign, make sure that you do the federal assistance summary option before the federal assistance detail option. Even though when you look at the periodic menu, the detail option is listed first because the menus in the redesign are listed alphabetically, but you have to make sure you do the summary option first so that the detail option can be associated with it. Then when you get to your federal assistance detail on the periodic menu, with Classic, there was that initialization option that we mentioned that's going to pull in your information from the current account files. There is not an initialization option in the redesign. And this information also did not import from Classic. So if you're going to this option on the menu for the very first time, there's not going to be anything there. So going forward in future years, once you populate information here, it will stay and will be able to be updated. But for the first year, especially, you're going to have a lot of adding to do. So the recommendation is to go to the core accounts option and pick the cash tab and filter your grid to 500 funds that have a fiscal year to date expended amount of more than 0 and a fiscal year to date received amount of more than 0. Click that report button at the top of the grid to generate a report, and that's the information that you're going to have to input here, plus any additional funds that were not in the 500 range if you received federal funds, like for instance, Food Service 006. And those, you're just going to need to know which federal funds you need to look up. You can look those up under core accounts on the cash tab as well by searching for that specific additional non-500 federal fund with a fiscal year to date expended greater than 0 and a fiscal year to date received greater than 0. Click that report button, and then that's your listing of the information that you need to input here in this federal assistance detail option. The fourth option, like we talked about in Classic, is for civil proceedings. So you need to go to the periodic menu and select civil proceedings and enter any lawsuit information for your district. It is just like Classic where you have to access each one of these options even if you don't have any data to input, just so that the system knows that you're complete with this step before you can move on. So once the USA EMS EDT or the periodic menu options are complete, then it's time for you to report your information to ODE through the data collector. And what type of information is going to ODE? You have the cash, budget, and revenue account information, the OPU information that Mary discussed with you, any data that we just talked about entering in USA EMS EDT or the periodic menu in the redesign, and the information that Mary talked about on USA EMS DB or periodic billing profiles. This year, like Mary mentioned at the April meeting, capital assets are no longer being reported to ODE, so that's no longer on this list of information that you are submitting. So how are you going to get that information into the data collector? In Classic, you're going to use the USA EMS option to create an extract of all of that information that you entered in the USA EMS EDT and USA EMS DB options. And as you run that USA EMS option, you may receive some warnings or messages because it's running verifications as you're creating that extract to make sure that you've entered those EMS fund categories like Mary talked about, that your cash reconciliation balances, that you entered each one of the 4 options in the USA EMS EDT option, you entered all of those CFDA numbers, and you have a current fiscal year in the federal assistance summary record. So if you get any errors, you need to go back and correct those so that you make sure this USA EMS option completes and creates your output files. You're going to see a partial output file and a full output file, and you're going to load the partial output file into the data collector. The full output file is only for CTEC to help LACA load the ITC data into the data collector. So everybody else is just going to use that USA EMS _ EMSR.SEQ partial file. And here is a picture of what this program looks like when you're running USA EMS. And the partial file that needs to get sent to the data collector is pulling all of that USA EMS EDT information, the cash rec, federal assistance, summary and detail, and civil proceedings, those 4 options, and then the USA EMS DB information. It is not pulling the account and OPU information because that is instead going to be pulled in through SIF, like Mary talked about previously. So from Classic, you've created that file. In order to get it into the data collector, you're going to run the EMIS EFM FTP program on the local menu to send that partial file to the data collector. And then when you're going into the data collector, you're also going to check the SIF box to run the SIF collection as well to pull that account and OPU information in. So in the redesign, how do you run through those steps? To extract your information out of the redesign, you're going to go to the extract menu, select EMIS, and then you have a generate extract file button that you're going to click. Like Classic, when you're creating your extract file, you may see some warning messages if you didn't complete all of those options. So if you see a warning message, go take care of that and create the extract file again. If you're successful, you will have that USA EMS _ EMSR.SEQ partial file that needs to get put into the data collector. Just like Classic, that partial file is including the cash rec, federal assistance summary and detail, civil proceeding information, district and building profile information, but not the account and OPU records because that information is going to get pulled in by SIF. And for you to load your extract file into the data collector, that extract file was generated in your browser when you clicked that generate button. So then you're going to log into the data collector and upload that file. So after you log into the data collector, you need to click the data sources tab, which is near the top right of the data collector, and then select other data sources, click manage, and then click upload file, and browse and find your file and upload it. Then when you run your collection, just like Classic, you're also going to check mark SIF to pull in your account and OPU information. So Mary talked a little bit about this with Lottie. If you were trying to do your account validation as a pre-closing step, you would have to do this extract step and this upload step in order to get your information into the data collector earlier if you wanted to preview your warnings in the data collector. So we've mentioned that you want to make sure you check mark SIF in the data collector because it's pulling in that account information and the OPU information. And how is it pulling in that information? It's paying attention to the EMIS reporting year flag in USAStat USA Con, in Classic, or in the redesign. there's an option under the system menu, configuration, EMIS SOAP service that tells the SIF which year it should pull information from. So in Classic, I believe everybody can see USAStat, but that EMIS reporting year should already be updated for you. In Redesign, I don't think districts can see that system configuration, EMIS SOAP service configuration option. So if you're worried if you think something unusual is going on and it's not pulling current year information, you can call us and we can verify that for you. But everybody should be updated to the current year as of right now at the end of the year. So you have your partial file in the data collector, your check marking SIF, and you're then going to start, prepare, and submit your collection for period H to submit that information to ODE. The deadline for that is August 31st. There is no supplemental reporting period this year because that mostly was available in order to submit capital asset information. And since ODE is no longer collecting capital asset information, they're not going to open a supplemental reporting period. So if you previously waited and did the submission later in September, you want to make sure you have that marked on your calendar that you have to be 100% done with the submission no later than August 31st this year. And then for gap reporting in Classic, if you need any additional reports that are not part of the fiscal CD, you can go ahead and run those. For instance, you might want a copy of your workers' comp report or the gap SIRS, gap STRS, SIRS paid, and STRS paid reports from the local menu. And once you have all of that report information saved, then you can run the gap export option on the USA EXP menu if you are uploading information into WebGap. We also have a fiscal year-end gap checklist that was emailed out and is also available on the LACA website that walks through this information in more detail. For redesign, if you are doing gap reporting, you'll generate any additional reports as you desire, just like in Classic, and then you will run the gap extract from the extract menu. Select the current fiscal year, hit submit, that generates your extract file, and you will email that to whoever maintains your WebGap system. So in Classic, that USA EXP gap _EXP gives you the option to input an email address to send it to somebody. You're actually going to take this file that was generated in your browser, attach it to a separate email, and send it to that individual. The next step for fiscal year end is to send AOS your audit information. So in Classic, you're going to run USAS Aud, the Auditor Extraction Program, for a date range of July 1st through the current date that you're running it. And so to grab everything, even if you're running this on July 1st or 2nd of 2020, you want to grab all of the audit changes that were in your system through the current day to include anything that was done in FY20. And you will answer yes to send the information to AOS, and it will send some SEQ files and a FinSum to AOS. You also have the option, which we'll see a screenshot here, that you can, in a minute we'll see a screenshot, that you can enter an email address if you want to send that information to anybody else. So you may want to send a copy to yourself so that you have that for future reference if needed, or just to confirm that it actually successfully went. And when you're running that program, it's extracting information from many places, creating several SEQ files and text files. The SEQ files are going to get sent to AOS. The text files are for your records if you would like them. And then the FinSum by fund goes to AOS as well. And here's a screenshot of that program in Classic where you can input that different address if you want to send a copy to someone else or to yourself, and make sure you say yes to send data to ALS now. So in redesign, in order to send this information to ALS, you're going to go to the report manager and run 4 reports. There's an SSDT auditor extract account, SSDT auditor extract transaction, SSDT auditor extract vendor, and SSDT cache summary. So the same 4 files that the Classic program sends, you're going to create those files in tab delimited format and attach those to an email to send those to ALS, and we provided that email here for you and also in your checklist. Then for your fiscal year end reports, in Classic, you're going to run Fiscal CD to generate that standard set of reports for Bear. So make sure everybody's logged out of the system, or you can elect to run this later. If you run it later, then you can't move on and close until those have completed. So you can also, if you run this now, you can log into Bear and make sure your reports are out there. If anybody is in the files and you're not aware of it, those reports will not complete and you will not see them in Bear. So go ahead and log into Bear, make sure your reports look okay. In redesign, you can manually run any of those reports if you would like to review them at this point in time, or the batch of reports, which there's a lot of them listed here on the screen. The batch of reports will be available as a report bundle when you close the month of June. So in Classic, you can kind of preview those reports in Bear before you actually close the month. In redesign, they're going to automatically generate when you close the month. So if you want to preview anything, go ahead and run any of those manually now, and then they'll be available to you in the file archive after you close June. After your fiscal year end reports are complete, you're going to call LACA. Whether you're Classic or redesign, your next step is call LACA. But when you call LACA as a Classic district, we're going to do all of these things on the screen. We're going to back up your current files. We're going to copy your monthly and fiscal year reports to a CD. We're going to create the FY20 directory for change year. We will run adjust for June and adjust for fiscal year end, and then we will call you back when you can move on. If you are a redesign district when you call us, then we are going to copy a backup of your files so that we have that in case we need to go back and look at that for any reason. That's not a required step in SSDT's mind. That's just a step that LACA would like to have as a backup, as a comfort level right now before we go down that path and close everything up. And so then once we tell you your backup is complete, then you will go to core posting periods and close June. So with Classic, we run adjust for June to close up June, and we run adjust for fiscal year to close up the fiscal year. But in the redesign, you as the district, you're going to do that. So just like you've closed every month, you're going to go to core posting periods, click on that close folder button to close June. That will kick off the report bundles for the monthly reports and the fiscal year end reports. So you can go to the file archive on the utilities menu and confirm that those are there. So you want to make sure that you go there and see that those reports are there before you make July current. Because any reports that are running in the redesign looking at the current month, you don't want those to pull July information because you've hurried up and made July current before those bundles of reports have completed. So when you close June, just sit there for a little bit, go look at the file archive, make sure the reports are there. Then you can go into the posting periods and make July current, which I assume most of you already have July open if you were entering FY21 requisitions or purchase orders. If not, you'll also have to open July and make it current. But if July's already open, you just have to check the box to make it current. Or click that check mark on the grid to make it current. And there's a note here about custom report bundles, but I don't think any of our current redesign districts have custom report bundles that are going to run at the end of the month or the end of the fiscal year. But if you have worked with us at some point, or if you plan to in the future, this is just a note to make sure that your custom report bundles completed as well, in addition to those monthly and fiscal report bundles. So those are your fiscal year end closing steps. Any questions on closing the fiscal year? So once you are closed, in Classic, you can run your Bauman, which you will also be able to see in Bear. You can run AutoPost to post any payroll, board, dis, or purchase order files that are out there. So if you have previously created future purchase orders dated in July, those are often forgotten. Just make sure you run AutoPost to make those future purchase orders become current, usable purchase orders at this point. You can use a probe to enter your initial proposed amounts if you didn't use the NYP options that Mary discussed. You can run a BUD-SUM, REV-SUM, and APP-SUM at this point, and then continue with the gap checklist. In redesign, you can run any of those same classic reports if you would like to have those for your records at this point in time, but they're not listed here as the CT didn't specifically require that you do those. Most reports are able to be easily regenerated in the redesign, but if you would like to generate any of those reports that I listed on the previous slide, feel free. It probably couldn't hurt anything. But you are going to go to transaction, pending transactions, to post any payroll batch files that are sitting out there or employer distribution files that are out there. You don't see purchase orders sitting here on this list like we talked about in Classic, because if you have future purchase orders that were out there for July, they're just automatically available to you to use because you're now in July. So there's no extra step for those like you had to do in Classic. So that's one less thing for you to worry about. You can go to budgeting scenarios and enter current year budgets and revenue estimates if you didn't already do that. And you can continue with the gap checklist if you are reporting gap. So if you are using the web gap option and you did not do this before closing the fiscal year, then this is just a reminder that you can run that gap export option now to create the file for web gap. And here's a screenshot showing where you input that email address to send the information to somebody who's going to upload the information into web gap. And then the same for redesign like we talked about previously. So you may have already done this, but if you didn't do it previously, then you can still go in and create your gap extract at this point in time and upload that file to an email and send that to the person who's going to load that into web gap for you. And then if you're using web gap, here is the URL and some information that may be of assistance to you as you're working on that. Just some helpful links there. And then capital assets. So capital assets are no longer reported to ODE through period H, but you should still be keeping up to date with your capital asset information. So if you are using state software EIS, there is a checklist that we emailed out for closing the fiscal year in EIS. In the previous years, we also had a checklist for non-EIS districts of steps that they needed to complete in EMIS FFE. But that checklist doesn't apply anymore since the only purpose of that was to get the information to ODE. So non-EIS districts, you still should be updating your information in your third-party software and closing out the fiscal year by whatever steps your software requires. But we still have the EIS checklist out there for districts on EIS. And then for any districts on the redesign, in addition to using that EIS checklist, there is a document that will probably be helpful to you that walks you through the process of extracting your inventory items that were purchased in redesign and importing that information into the classic EIS pending file, since you're right now still using the classic EIS system. So I know this is going to be an easy step to want to put off, but please try to keep your capital asset information current for us and keep that up to date, just like you have in the past, even though you're no longer reporting it to ODE. And then displaying on the screen is the draft schedule for this year's ODE submissions, showing that August 31st deadline for period H, and that ODE crossed out the supplemental reporting period because they're no longer going to have that. So as you're doing all of these post-closing steps and you are processing new July transactions, for a few years, we've recommended that you hold off on making any changes to your OPUs or your accounts or deleting accounts in the new fiscal year until after FY20 period H closes on August 31st. So hold off on running account change, fund change, or going into OPU edit, because when you check mark that SIF box in the data collector, if you would have to submit period H after you are closed for FY20, the SIF agent is going to go look and pull based on the account information or OPU information that it sees on the live files, the history files related to that live information. So if you've ran account change or fund change or changed your OPUs, it's going to not find the right information in the current year to pull the history files in from last year. So that's the reason why we recommend you hold off on making changes, because even though it's not pulling FY21 amounts, it's still using the FY21 date, like accounts and OPUs, to use as a reference to find the corresponding history files. And then when you're ready to close July, if your district uses MOEN to create custom reports in Bear for board members, just remember to update the fiscal year in your COM file before generating those reports. Any questions on fiscal year end closing in Classic or the redesign for accounting? So next, we're going to walk through the steps to close State Software EIS for the fiscal year. Does anybody want to take like a 5-minute break to stretch your legs or refill your coffee? Or do we want to keep moving?
Let's keep moving.
Okay, Mary's going to talk to you about equipment inventory.
Okay, this PowerPoint is to be used in conjunction with the fiscal year end equipment inventory closing checklist. And this is not meant to be your checklist, but just to give you a summary of what the steps should be. But please make sure you are using your checklist. Finish all of your current year processing. Items received on or before June 30, 2020 should be added to your equipment inventory for FY 2020. Any items received after June 30 will be added to the EIS pending file for FY 2021. For districts that are on the redesign, see the extract from redesign and import into EIS pending on the LACA website. You could run a budget account activity report for the fiscal year and specify the 6XX objects to get all of the items that should be entered into inventory. Run the EIS 304 or EIS 203 for acquisition dates in the fiscal years. The numbers may not be an exact match, but items can be compared. And then also check your board minutes for donated or disposed items. Districts with a life limit specified in the EIS M&T DAT screen for the capitalization criteria should run a EIS 304 brief asset listing to verify all items meeting the dollar amount, dollar capitalization criteria also have a valid life and are on file as capitalized assets. And you can see here the two fields are the dollar limit and the life limit. The EIS 304 brief asset listing, select non-capitalized items, status A, N, EH, and EN, active, new, excess asset, and held for sale, and excess asset not in use. The original cost equal to or greater than the threshold. It will list items that are over the threshold but not capitalized. Verify all of the items and correct items that should be capitalized. Then run the EIS 304, sort by FD and FC, and verify the fund and function are correct for all items. Run it again and sort by AC and IC and verify asset class is correct for all items. We then want to run the EIS 101, 102, and 103. Totals by fund type on the EIS 101, 102, and 103 should match when balancing out for the fiscal year. Any errors on the EIS 103E report should be resolved prior to closing. The EIS 104 schedule change in depreciation for capitalized assets, and then run the EIS 305 book value report for capitalized assets. The beginning depreciation of the 104 should match the life to date depreciation on the 305. The ending depreciation on the 104 should match the total depreciation on the 305. If desired, update replacement cost and or insurable values. Run the EIS 401 insurable values report, list current replacement cost and insurable values. Update the EIS M&T CAT screen inflation rate, and then run the EIS CHG program to update your items. Verify the 01XX asset class, designate subclasses for land and land improvements, and verify assets are appropriated appropriately classified into each court category. Land should have a depreciation of N for no depreciation. Land improvements should have depreciation for S. Verify the 08XX class for construction in process, and there should be a depreciation method of N for no depreciation on those. Run the EIS 801 audit report, selecting the official option, and keep that for the auditor in case they ask for it. Run the EIS CD to generate the fiscal year EIS reports that will go into Bear, and then contact LACA and we will create a backup of your files. Run the EIS CLS to close your fiscal year and clear the EIS audit files. And then we'll put your equipment inventory files in change year so you can go back and run reports on those if necessary. And we'll make sure your reports also are available out on Bear. Print the EIS DEP and EIS CLS copies that are created when we do the close program, so that you have those for the auditors. Run an EIS 103 for the new fiscal year. Verify the ending balance in FY20 equals the beginning balance for FY21, and then clean out your pending file. Delete any items that will not be added to inventory. Are there any questions about the EIS close? Again, for those districts on redesign, we have to run the file out of the redesign to load into Classic for the pending file, and then maintain everything in Classic for another year. And I guess if there's no questions, I'll turn it back over to Carrie and she'll go through the current fiscal.
Okay, first, we normally give you an update on RAM. So just a reminder that you'll probably, unless you may have already started seeing future requisitions go through RAM, so you may have been approving those, and your AP staff, when they receive those approval emails, those future requisitions are included. They are indicated with the word future in red in case you hold those requisitions and maybe don't convert them to purchase orders until after you close, or maybe just to alert them if you go ahead and convert them now to make sure they're using that future date for that PO date. So keep an eye out for those future requisitions in RAM. Since we talked the last time at the April meeting, Chad has had to make a very few minor changes to RAM for redesign imports. He had to increase a couple field lengths, like for the vendor name and the item quantity, just to get those files to successfully load into RAM, because in Classic we were limited on field lengths and in redesign we're not. So we've had a few issues that we had to research and found out that we were limiting in RAM based on the Classic limits. And so we had to remove those limits for the redesign districts, but it's all been working fine. After those minor changes, does anybody have any questions or concerns with RAM or anything that they've seen since the last time we talked? Okay, so an update on the employee kiosk. I think I've had this item on here for a very long time, that the timesheet module is still available in the employee kiosk, but we do not yet have any LACA districts using that. So if anybody is interested, just a reminder that that's out there. We can look at that with you if you would like to look at that. And at the last meeting, I asked you guys to clean up active users in the kiosk. So I just wanted to thank you for helping us clean that up by that April 27th deadline, where the Management Council took a count of users and collected that information to bill LACA for the next year. So thank you in helping clean that up if you helped clean that up. And then we also have talked at the last few meetings about the PDF pay slips and W-2s that are available in kiosk for your employees to access. And we discussed this length of retention quite a bit. And I just wanted to give you an update that our network team has a script ready that they have written. We haven't executed it yet, but that script is going to accomplish this. So right now there may be 7, 10, or 12 years of pay slips in your kiosk databases accessible by your employees. And when we run this script, it's going to limit those down for classic districts to the current partial calendar year of 2020 and the prior full calendar year of 2019. And when we run this script, it's going to limit the number of PDF W-2s that are available to your employees down to 4 years. We had discussed it as a group current calendar year plus 3 preceding years. And as we were writing the script, we were kind of wondering what we meant by current calendar year, because there really isn't a W-2 to the end of the year. So we just wrote it to leave 4 years. So since that 2019 W-2 is generated in 2020, I'm assuming that's what we meant by current calendar year W-2. So when we execute this script for the first time, it's going to clean up W-2s so that there are only W-2s for 2019, 2018, 2017, and 2016 accessible to your employees when they log into kiosk. So we have this script written to run on the first of every month just to make sure everything's cleaned up, even though the bulk of the cleanup is going to happen just January 1st every year. So I didn't know if everybody wanted to alert their employees that this is going to happen, or if you just want it to happen. And, you know, most people probably aren't looking at really old stuff anyways, so they may not even notice that it happens. But if you want to notify your district staff, please send an email and let them know that when they log in on July 1st, they will only see pay stubs for the current calendar year plus the prior calendar year, and they will only see 4 years of W-2s. So if they want anything older than that, they could log in and download it, or log in and print it off on June 30th or before. And then going forward, it'll stay cleaned up based on this length of retention. And then for redesign, we have of course already imported information for those districts that are live, and that information sits in redesign and will connect to kiosk for them. And then with the new districts, we're just going to import from Classic, so it'll be based on this length for the new districts too. But this cleanup is just going to really impact Classic districts, because Classic districts are looking back at this server. The kiosk is looking back at the Classic server for those slips sitting out there and W-2s sitting out there. And we've only imported in redesign accordingly. So, sorry for the long explanation of that, but questions? Anybody? If not, we'll be done with this July 1st. An update on eFinance Plus. Round 8 is almost complete now, so Heath and Granville have been working on their parallel payrolls, and I've been hearing that those are going well. They should be getting very close to having their final few items to take care of, and then they will be going live July 1st. Round 9 is this fall, but we did not have any LACA districts express interest in that, with a goal go live date of January 1st. So I don't know if there are any questions about the eFinance Plus project, or I don't know if Todd's still on. I know he was previously on. If he
I'm on.
And Carl, I think I saw Carl on. If either of them have comments or anything to say or share.
I don't, and I can answer questions, but I mean, I don't have anything to add.
Yeah, I think the project's going well. Like you said, the payroll data was.
I can't hear you well, Carl.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Yep, that works.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that the parallels are going well. We just had our first staff training on the requisition process. I think it was good, but it is a bit of a transition for the folks because it's just a new system and this is their first exposure to it. So we're going to continue to have a soft open for them where they can play in the test environment and practice putting in requisitions, approving things. But otherwise, I think everything's going well.
Good, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have any questions about eFinance Plus?
Hi, good morning. I'm Tanya. I'm the new treasurer at Licking Valley.
Hello.
Hi. So this is something that obviously our district is going to pursue. I have a couple of other irons in the fire, but I know that with us being on the ACE software, it'll be a totally different type of a conversion process. And my IT person here is very aware that this is something that we will be pursuing. So I did want to point that out to you, that this is definitely something that I have strong interest in. E-finance is not my background. My forte has been classic. So we'll see, but I am looking very forward to doing the process. And I know Todd Griffith has already reached out to me and assured me that anything that he or anyone else on this team can do, I feel very confident, and it makes me feel very assured that there's so many treasurers and other districts that LACA represents using e-finance, and Todd had nothing but good things to say about it. So I did want to share that hopefully in the near future, this will be something that we will be definitely moving on.
Okay, good. We'll have to have some conversations with you and get you signed up for a wave, probably. So I don't know if Chad wants to reach out to you and maybe get something started on that conversation, or maybe he already has, or if you want to reach out.
No, he hasn't.
Okay.
And that's what I was actually going to ask you, is what I need to do next.
So why don't Chad and I will talk a little bit right after the meeting, and one of us will reach out to you and we'll get the conversation started on that.
Sounds real good. I look forward to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And welcome to LACA Land, Tanya. I saw that you were on earlier and I was going to mention it at the end, but I'm glad you made yourself known, and welcome to our organization.
I very much appreciate that. I can't say how excited that I am to be part of the Licking County area, and this was a very welcome change for me. So I'm very excited. This will hopefully be my last stop. I worked in a few other districts and I'm quickly realizing that this will become home.
Well, good.
Yep.
It's a good place.
Hey, Tanya. This is Carl. Hey, if I know Todd's probably going to be your resource for what the system looked like in the end, but if you have any questions on what the implementation process is like, feel free to give me a call.
I am totally going to take you up on that. So don't throw it out there unless you mean it, because I certainly will. Again, I'm going to welcome any hints and advice along the way. So thank you so much, Carl, for mentioning that. I will certainly be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes, thank you, Carl, for offering that, and thank you, Todd, for offering as well. And Tanya, you may already know because Todd may have mentioned it, but Todd and Carl have went through completely different implementation processes, because Licking Heights was implemented by Power School and Heath and Granville are being implemented by TCCSA. So Carl would be a good resource, or I'm sure Brittany at Granville as well, of what that implementation process looked like with TCCSA specifically.
Brittany would absolutely help too. Carl and Brittany are both like pretty awesome. So.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be part of such a very supportive treasurer team. I can't say enough how I've kind of done some research on my own, and Todd reached out to me first and just said, hey, welcome aboard. After that, I kind of went through and looked to see who else would be partnering with me here in Licking County, and I know that there's some great people. So thank you again all very much. I can't wait to explore what's out there and get to know all of you and definitely learn from you.
Okay, and then I do have on the screen just a list of current eFinance Plus live districts and implementing districts for anybody interested in how that project has grown recently. That map was updated in April. They typically update it with each wave, so we probably won't see an updated map until this fall, but that's there just for your reference if interested. And then as a comparison, I guess my next map might be a little blurry on district names. I guess I apologize for that. But there's a map of the state software redesign, currently live districts and currently implementing districts, to see how that project is growing as well. And then the next slide, at the last meeting, Pat talked to you about the redesign and how it had grown. I think she gave you a list of counts from like a year ago, and then those March counts that are on the screen, where in March of the current year, there were 129 sites live on the redesign. And as a point of reference, I just wanted to tell you that I was on the state software steering committee call that they had in May, and their project manager was excited that they had crossed the 200 mark in May, that over 200 sites were live on redesign. So wave 6 for the redesign is coming up this fall, and we have 3 LACA districts participating in that: Mount Vernon, North Fork, and North Ridge. So we already had a pre-kickoff meeting by Zoom with them and discussed a few things. And then LACA has to complete the Management Council questionnaire, just confirming those districts and their information by June 5th. So that'll all be taken care of. And then the rest of the wave, we will next schedule a kickoff meeting with those districts where we go through some recommended cleanup steps of things that they can clean up data-wise in Classic, and then talk to them about their third-party vendors and make sure that they are going to start contacting them and letting them know about their transition. So we'll have a whole packet of information that we'll go through at that kickoff meeting, and we'll share that date once we get it scheduled. And then immediately prior to your parallel processing, we will schedule a 3-day training where we will go through the USASR and the USPSR and talk about like the accounts receivable and the EIS replacement options and workarounds if your district uses either of those. And then you will parallel. What is recommended is 1 month of parallel entry for accounting and at least 2 parallels for payroll. So when we talked at the pre-kickoff meeting, most of those 3 districts were looking at like the September-October timeframe. So we will probably be doing training either right at the end of August or right at the end of September, and then paralleling for that month of September or month of October, and then hopefully going live like on the 1st or the 2nd of the following month. SSDT has a absolute deadline of going live by December 9th in wave 6. They just want to make sure everything's wrapped up before you have to go through a calendar year end. So I know hopefully the wave 6 districts were kind of aware of that information from our pre-kickoff, but I wanted to go through that and share that schedule on the screen because I think it's a little informative to the districts who are going to go through future waves as well. But does anybody have any questions about what a wave might look like or specific questions about wave 6? And then on your screen, I've displayed the current list of which districts are scheduled in which waves and of LACA districts. So Southwest Licking was in a previous wave and they were live. So very soon here we'll be dropping the wave 5 off of this list as well, because Crooksville, East Muskingum, and the ESC are already live, and Granville and Heath will soon be live. So that row's almost complete, and then we'll just be focused on wave 6 forward. The final update for the redesign is just that the accounts receivable module is very close to being ready. They are going to start testing the beta version on June 15th. And Cheryl Johnson from the ESC is live on the redesign, and she's been helping them. She's on a committee that is giving them feedback on this new program, and she's going to assist with their beta testing. And then their SSDT's goal go live date for the accounts receivable module is August 3rd. So if any future redesign districts will be needing that module, it will be available this August. And then the equipment inventory module for redesign is scheduled to be available next August of 2021. So I just wanted to share that information with you. Right now for equipment inventory, if you're live on redesign, there's a workaround where we're extracting the information from the redesign and uploading it into the classic pending file so that you're still using classic EIS without much difficulty. So any questions on the redesign project? Next, Chad will give you an update.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a whole lot here. I just wanted to update you at the last governing board meeting in May, on May 21st. We did vote to dissolve LACA as the consortium it is today and reform ourselves as a Council of Governments, COG, effective July 1. So that vote went through, and now we're just in the process. Ben was approved to be hired as our treasurer. So he's going through a lot of the process along with me of getting all of our paperwork in order, different things we need to do, setting up our own tax ID, just, all those necessary things. But as far as just day-to-day operations, the way LACA is going to provide services, those kind of things to you is not going to be visibly any different. So does anyone have any questions about the COG update? I think we've been keeping everyone up to date on that and what we're doing and why, but just curious if anyone has any questions for me on that. And hearing crickets, I'm going to assume no. So if you do, you're always free to contact me. And then as far as the fiscal support job search, we did 3 second interviews yesterday. We're going to have some discussion here after the meeting today, and I'm hoping to make an offer by the end of this week and get somebody started to fill Pat Zeeley's vacant position as soon as possible. We've got some good candidates. Nobody's coming to us from the K-12 world, so it's people applying from private industry, but they seem skilled, knowledgeable. I don't think it'll take them long to get up to speed on school finance and the nuances and the differences there and be able to support you. So we're happy we've got some good candidates, and I will let you know as soon as we have somebody on board. That's really all I've got, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Okay, thank you, Chad.
Yep, thanks.
An item of unfinished business that we always have on the agenda is the treasurer's retreat. Last time we talked, and probably the time before, about it being in October for 2020 in Lancaster or Hocking Hills. And Julie had requested that you email her topics that you would like to have at that retreat. So are there any other comments, questions? Does anybody have any topics they would like to throw out today of topics that they would like to learn more about at a retreat later this year?
I've not received any topics so far, but again, we're way out, and I'm assuming that we're all willing to travel in October with all this COVID stuff. But I did put in a quote to get some information from the Inn and Spa at Cedar Falls, and that's in Logan, Ohio. So I will let you know what their availability is, and if anybody wants to check that out and has any comments about the place. But it looks like a nice place, and they host groups. So we'll see if the money is right and they have some days that fit our schedule.
Thank you, Julie. And also at the last meeting, we discussed the future format of these meetings. So there is consensus at the last meeting that the future meetings will be a little bit more relaxed, more similar to our roundtables, because the COG is establishing the Fiscal Advisory Committee as a standing committee, and the bylaws for the COG do not require the committee to follow the Roberts Rules of Order and have a vice chair and a chair and motions and all of that good stuff. So with the next meeting, when you join us later this year, we'll be a little bit more relaxed and we won't run it so much like a board meeting. So anybody who didn't join us last time, I just wanted to share that. And if anybody has any questions. Does anybody have any items they would like to ask each other or discuss with their group? Hearing nothing, there is a list of upcoming meetings on your screen. So we have the payroll roundtable for fiscal year end for your users next week. We're hoping, of course, to be back in the office. So we had this fiscal year end open lab scheduled, but we will post a Zoom session and just let anybody join and ask questions, and we can sit here and work with you on any fiscal year end warning messages, anything that you're receiving, anything that you would like help with on any of these fiscal year end steps that we discussed today, or any of the steps that we discussed with your payroll group. So feel free to join that Zoom session. I'll send out connection information next week, and let us know if you plan to join, and we'll keep an eye out for you and help you during that work session. And we have the new contract training scheduled for the redesign users on June 16th and an advanced reports session for any districts that are live on the redesign for June 19th. And then we have a live district status call for live redesign districts on July 16th. So those are the upcoming meetings that LACA has scheduled. And as of right now, all of those will be by Zoom, unfortunately, considering the current status of things. But if anybody has any questions about those, let me know, or if you're interested in signing up for those, feel free to sign up on the website. And then I also have a list of the FY21 fiscal advisory meetings. So I do not have a specific date scheduled for the October one yet, because we mentioned possibly holding that in conjunction with the retreat. But the other dates, if you want to go ahead and make sure those are on your calendars, we have rooms reserved for those. And if there's nothing else, is Kelly still on to do a motion to adjourn? Kelly, are you there now?
Yes. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Julie Taylor.
Seconded by Fisher.
Thank you.
Do we need to do an all in favor? Say aye.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. Let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to email us or call us as you normally would. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.